What is up, Star Wars fans? This is Darth Watson. In this video, we're going to be talking about Star Wars creator George Lucas making his first Comic-Con event. This will be his first Comic-Con event that he's going to be attending. And it looks like with his first Comic-Con event, he's going to be asked a lot of Star Wars questions and probably stuff that has to do with his dissatisfaction with Disney, how Disney is taking Star Wars on a different path than what George Lucas had intended, which George Lucas said himself that Star Wars has gone on a different path than what he originally intended. But we'll probably get some more insight on that at when George Lucas appears at Comic Con, which is just around the corner in about less than a couple of weeks. A few days ago, I did a YouTube short talking about just reporting on George Lucas making his first Comic Con appearance in a couple weeks. Now that George Lucas is going to be making his first Comic Con appearance, he's probably going to reveal some stuff of his original intentions of Star Wars going forward when he sold Star Wars to Disney and how Disney took that on a different path than what George Lucas had originally intended. Now, I'm not going to be the one to say that Star Wars has gone off entirely different than what George Lucas had originally intended. Now, yes, Star Wars has gone off on a different path than what George Lucas had originally intended, but it's not it's not completely away from what George Lucas had intended. It's not completely apart from what way off from George Lucas. I mean, a lot of George Lucas's ideas and elements from those ideas did play out. And a lot of the ideas that were in the outlines, specifically for The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, if you read The Art of the Force Awakens and The Last Jedi took up the most inspiration from what George Lucas had in his treatments for the sequel trilogy. And George Lucas commented on The Last Jedi, saying that it was beautifully made. And that's exactly the direction George Lucas would have taken for Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi if he were to pick up after J.J. Abrams. And George Lucas's sequel trilogy treatments also had Luke Skywalker dying in Episode 8. So George Lucas has influenced the sequel trilogy a lot, and the sequel trilogy did take up a lot of inspiration from what George Lucas had intended, but the way it was put out, and it's not what happened, it's how it happened, and the way it was put out is that it was gone off on a different path than what he intended in the first place. Like, Palpatine returning in The Rise of Skywalker is probably definitely not something George Lucas would have done if he were to make the sequel trilogy. Palpatine would have stayed dead as was originally intended, and Ian McDiarmid revealed that even though he had speculations on how Palpatine might have survived after the events of Return of the Jedi, but George Lucas said no, he's dead. So definitely not something George Lucas would have done, and that's how Star Wars went off on a different path than what George Lucas had intended. And it really started with The Rise of Skywalker, with bringing back Palpatine, because that's not something that George Lucas would have done if he made the sequel trilogy. But I'm not here to complain about Disney Star Wars and the way Disney is taking Star Wars in a different direction. Do I agree with everything that Disney has done to Star Wars since 2012? No, I do not. I don't agree with everything that Disney has done with Star Wars since 2012 when they bought it from George Lucas. And I'm a fan of all of Star Wars. I'm not going to be the one totally hating on Disney Star Wars just because it's not going off on the same path that same path of what George Lucas had originally intended, or just because I disagree with some of the things that Disney has done. I'm still going to enjoy Star Wars and go see every new Star Wars movie that comes out, as well as review every Disney Plus show that comes out. even though I don't agree with everything Disney has done with Star Wars, and I would have to rate The Acolyte as my least favorite Star Wars show that Disney has done. But the point is that George Lucas is going to be making an appearance at at a Comic-Con event for the first time. He'll be interviewed on Star Wars and we'll get some more insight on what George Lucas had originally intended for Star Wars going forward and what the path that he wanted Star Wars to go on and how Disney took it differently. But that's going to be probably going to be revealed as George Lucas has been will be asked about Star Wars quite will be asked about Star Wars and what his original intention was, and he'll reveal some of his dissatisfaction with what Disney has done going forward. But anyways, that's all I have to say for this video. Do make sure to smash a like, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you all later in another video.